Genesis chapter 4, verses 1 through 10. And Adam knew Eve his wife, and she conceived and bore a son, Cain, and said, I have gotten a man from the Lord. And she again bare his brother Abel, and Abel was a keeper of sheep, but Cain was a tiller of the ground. And in process of time it came to pass that Cain brought of the fruit of the ground an offering unto the Lord. And Abel, he also brought of the firstlings of his flock, and of the fat thereof. And the Lord had respect upon Abel and to his offering. But unto Cain and to his offering he had not respect. And Cain was very wroth, and his countenance fell. And the Lord said unto Cain, Why art thou wroth, and why is thy countenance fallen? If thou doest well, shalt that not be accepted? And if thou doest not well, sin lieth at the door. And unto thee shall be his desire, and thou shalt rule over him. And Cain talked with Abel his brother, and it came to pass when they were in the field, that Cain rose up against Abel his brother, and slew him. We've read this story, seems like a million times, right? And I remember when I was into the Bible and I would read this, and I'd have so many questions. You know, everyone asks, where did Cain get his wife and things like that. But my question was, why wasn't Cain killed? You know, because oftentimes when someone did something wrong in the Bible, the God of the Bible would slaughter them and kill them. But for some reason here, Cain, where everyone believed it was justified because he killed his brother, he was pardoned. And we go on in the chapter, and God says that the God of the Bible tells him that his punishment, he'll be a vagabond and he shall roam the earth east of Eden. And as a result, that was his curse. And he also had another curse. But the Bible really doesn't tell us how this curse would manifest and how he would be distinguished between himself and the other people in the land. And that's why Cain asked the God of the Bible, how am I going to be protected? Because someone can see me and they'll kill me. Surely they'll kill me. So the God of the Bible said that that would not happen. What's the story though? What really happened? What is the fullness of this story that we scratch our heads and we're just perplexed because we can't figure out what the fullness of this story was? And if we knew the fullness of the story, then we'd be a lot more educated, wouldn't we? The problem is that this story, you will not get those answers from the Bible that has been approved. You will not get that from the 66, and you will not get much of it either from the books that were also removed, the pseudepigrapha and the apocrypha and those books. You will not get specific details. Why? Because the Bible is a book that was written much, well, way after these events actually happened. The Bible is a telling of events that happened before. It's a gathering of the details that happened before there was even an invention of a Bible. And so the Bible writers and everything, or the people that collected the Bible together, took these ancient stories much older than the Bible, and they gathered them and put it in a book and gave it to you and presented to you as your religion. But where do these stories stem from? And why is it that it's before the Bible, but yet we don't have access to these records? These roots, these stories are hidden from you so that you don't see the grander picture and the full picture of who is really speaking in the Bible when they're speaking, who gave the Bible and why they gave it. If you knew these things, you take a second guess, or you take a second position as to whether or not you're going to worship a book and idolize it the way that you've been doing it. All right, so I'll cut to the chase. We can't find the answer as to why Cain killed his brother in the scriptures. We can figure out or guesstimate that he was jealous of him, okay, yeah. But why is it that the God of the Bible did not accept Cain's gift but he accepted Abel's. And why was it that Cain was pardoned? The root, ancient Sumer, is the answer, as I've been showing in all my videos and in my book. I'm going to turn the screen around and I'm going to share with you some of the scriptures and then take you to the root of ancient Sumer, where we will learn the details that the Bible leaves out, that doesn't tell you. We will go to the missing link and the root of the real story of Cain and Abel and how it all went down. So stay tuned. Okay, so we're going to take it back a little bit. We're going to go to Genesis chapter 1 and verse 26. And we know this, I've reflected on this many times when sharing the story of ancient Sumer and how the gods of the Bible are actually the Anunnakki. And here we know this scripture, let us make man in our image. We already know that. And the our and the us is Elohim, which translated into the English would be gods and goddesses. Okay, gods and goddesses. So not only a masculine term for God, but also feminine as well. And so these feminine Elohim said, let us make man in our image. Now we know from the videos that I've done before, one of the Anunnaki gods of this pantheon of the Elohim, one of their names was Enki. Okay? I've spoken about Enki before. Enki was the Anunnaki god who was the genetic scientist. Okay, so Enki was the genetic scientist. Not the only one, but he was a genetic scientist. And so Enki, in the genetic scientist, we see gene. And correspondingly, we see gene in Genesis as well. There's a breakdown to the Isis part as well, but I'm going to focus on the genetics, okay? Because Enki was a genetic scientist. He is one of the Elohim that said, let us make man in our image. We also have someone else that I mentioned in this pantheon of gods, and he was the nemesis of Enki. He was his brother, and his name was Enlil. Okay? Now, Enki had a son, and Enki's son's name was Marduk. Okay? Oops. Now, with this genetic scientist, one of the things that they had to do was, out of the pantheon of the gods, we are told in the book of Enoch, one of the books that were taken out of the Bible, we are also told in Genesis chapter 6 that the sons of God, doesn't tell us who they are, it doesn't elaborate, but the sons of God came down to mix with the daughters of men. So in the book of Enoch, it tells us that some of these sons of God came down and they taught man that was made in the image of the gods and goddesses different arts. So they taught them agriculture, they taught them science, they taught them mathematics, how to make the calendar, all of those things that would create a civilization. And according to the Bible, this was wrong. But when you know the entire story and the root from ancient Sumer, you find that it's not what you've always been told it was. Was it really wrong, or are they just in an attempt to obscure the whole story of mankind's history, they kind of turn you off from understanding all of these details that I've been sharing with you in my videos and also in my book. So, in this story that's much older than the Bible, the root, we learn of all of these different gods and goddesses of the pantheon. So Enki, his brother Enlil, Marduk is the son of Enki. And then we also learn of a female goddess, and her name was Ninurta. Okay? Her name was Ninurta. She was a pivotal character in this whole narrative and this story, but I'm going to specifically stay with this right now so that I can build on the story of which I read to you, Cain and Abel. How did Cain, for one, why was his gift not accepted, and why wasn't he just put to death by the YHWH of the Bible for killing his brother Abel? Well, in this story, we also learn of another male god, and his name was Dumuzi. Okay? Now, each of these four gods were given an assignment. Okay? Enki's clan was to help teach Cain how to take care of the land, how to make crops and agriculture, grow grains, and all of those things that we read about in Genesis chapter 4 about what Cain did. Enki's clan was in charge of that, okay? Which means that since Enki's clan was in charge of it, his son Marduk also became mentor, a teacher to Cain on agriculture. In addition to that, before Marduk took over in teaching Cain how to till the land and make grain and all the food to eat, before he did, Dumuzi was given the job to mentor Cain on how to do those things. When it came to Abel, who learned how to take care of animals, the sheep and the goats and all of those things like that, he was given the mentorship by Ninurta. So Ninurta, and also Enlil's clan. So Enlil, the other god of the Bible, that was the nemesis of Enki, Enlil was overseeing Abel's job. And so Enlil, Ninurta, they all were teaching him how to take care of the animals. In fact, we get into DNA and everything. Abel was taught all of those things pertaining to the sheep and the goats and all of those animals that he was raising. Now, because Cain and Abel were each assigned different gods to help them, like the book of Enoch says and the book of Genesis says, that these fallen ones or whatever came and taught the sons of man different civilization secrets. Well, each of them had their teachers and had the gods that were set up over them. So when you go to the root of the story of Cain and Abel, the answers to the questions that I asked previously in the video are all in this. It's all contained in what I shared with you. The root. And so according to the tales much older than the Bible that elaborate more than Genesis chapter 4 verses 1 through 10 and more, elaborate more than let us make man in our image, it tells us about Enki, the master genetic scientist, and his brother Enlil. And it tells us that Enki mixed his seed with the earthlings. And when Enki mixed his seed with the earthlings, he was not allowed to do it because he was going against the edicts of the gods, or the council of the gods in Psalm 82, where the gods said it was illegal for any higher being, they called them higher beings, to mix their seed with the earthlings. And so now we get Genesis chapter 6. Where the God of the Bible was angry because the higher ones were coming down and mixing with the daughters of men. And so Enki, being the genetic scientist, he did more than just seeding a female and having copulation with her. He took his genes from his own rib as well and mixed them with different species of man or earthling on the planet. And when he did that, he ended up having grandchildren from his offspring. Who do you think the grandchildren were? Yes, you got it. Cain and Abel. And because he was the grandparent of Cain and Abel, he was not only just the paternal line of Cain and Abel as a grandfather, but he was also the maternal. So he was like all in these two offspring. And so because of that, he had compassion for these two children, right? And so these two children are like, Grandpa, look what I have for you. And also Enlil, because remember, Enlil was overseeing Abel. And also Abel, because as I mentioned before, Enlil was overseeing the teaching discipline or mentorship of Abel. And so because they were linked, not only in seeing these children grow up, but they were also bloodlines of each other. And so they had compassion for them. So here these two kids come, and Cain learning the ground and how to make food and all that. Abel learning animals and how to even sacrifice them, all of that stuff. And they're both like, hey, look, Dad, look, Grandpa, look at both of you, or, uncle, whatever, because they were all of those things meshed in one. Look at what we have for you. We're presenting you, as the Sumerian texts tell, with our first fruits. Key. The Bible speaks of first fruits, giving your first fruits to God. Even in the Old Testament, when they were sacrificing, it had to be the first fruits. Why? Even the feasts. Because the first fruits were what Cain and Abel established. When they bought their gods and presented it between their grandfather and their uncle's brother or whatever, Enki and Enlil. The only thing is, because Enki was giving oversight over Cain and Enlil was given oversight over Abel, and they both were very territorial with the children that they oversaw. So Ninurta, which was a feminine goddess, she decides that she is going to step on Enki's territory and start mentoring Cain. So Cain comes with his gift, like Abel, to Enki and Enlil and presents it. Enki sees the gift that Ninurta helped him establish, and Enki instead looks at Abel and starts to praise Abel for his bearings and gifts rather than praising the grandson that he was chosen by the gods to mentor over. So we're dealing with jealousy here. We're dealing with a jealous grandfather because it was his job to be proud of Cain, but instead Ninurta was getting all of the praise. So Enki overlooked Cain's gift and instead showed favor to Abel. And so of course Cain was jealous. Cain takes his brother, and after months of being together, he and his brother, they got into a fight, according to these ancient texts, much older than the Bible, and he slew his brother. Now, something has to be done between these gods, and so they sit on a council, another council that they established on the earth to deal with the earthlings. And when they establish this council, Cain and Abel come before them, and the gods have to decide what judgment Cain will bear. Now remember, let us make man in our image. Enki, the genetic scientist who mixed his genes into Cain and Abel and his seed before them, was the grandfather, maternally and paternity, of both of them. And so he had compassion. And the other gods as well, because he told the other gods, how can you kill us? This is part of our bloodline. And so the gods, in agreement, they concurred, and they said that the punishment for Cain would be that he would be banished to another land. And he would also have a physical feature that would distinguish him from others. And so now we get the full story of Genesis chapter 4, verses 1 through 10, of Cain and Abel. why Cain wasn't killed like you would think the Bible God would do, because he did it so many times, and why it is that his gift, Abel, was more favored than Cain's. And so, Genesis chapter 4, I present to you the root of Genesis chapter 4, which is ancient Sumer. The root of your Bible. Stay tuned. There's a lot more. And if you are looking to figure this all out, because this alone, the story of Cain and Abel, you've been asking yourself this. So, like me, the story of Cain and Abel, you have been asking yourself the same questions I have. And so now you know. Now you know why Cain's gift was not appreciated, and why he slew his brother, and why he was not given the verdict and the judgment of death. His grandfather Enki. This is why I wrote my book, because all of these stories that we read about in our Bible, they're incomplete. And there had to be a missing link, and I found it. Many have found it, and they've been speaking out for decades, and they haven't been heard. It's time for us to wake up and understand what has happened to humanity. What is the big deception that has happened to humanity? And why have you been made fearful to stay in religion and beliefs, even when I present this to you? Even when I present this information to you, you run back to religion because you're so afraid. They've taught you to fear. It is a design. Fear is a design and a mechanism created by the Anunnakki so that you stay subordinate and so that you continue to give them your power. And they can continue to be called gods and goddesses, because the more that you feed them, the more that you pray to them, the more energy you give them. And yet, no matter how much you pray and ask, they can't answer your prayers. Why? Because they don't have the power to. Ask them right now to lift the book off your table, or to free the captives, to give you food, to feed the hungry. They can't, they don't, and they won't. The more, though, that worship them and give them power, the more people they have on their side, the stronger they become. And so this is why they keep you fearful, and they keep you in numbers, and they recruit. And this is why they don't want you to know this. And they don't want you to know this and to take all the stories and put it on the table and figure out what the root of your belief is. Because once you realize the root of your belief, then your worship is no longer theirs. Stay tuned. I have more.